As if all this weren't enough, Jen noticed that his little stint in the closet had gone down the same night that Jen was listening to Alejandra as she spilled the beans on the whole Elena and Chiquis affair. Then in addition to this troublesome discovery, she also found footage of Esteban going into her safe, taking bricks of cash and stuffing them into a black Prada bag. Suddenly, tangled in a web of lies and deception, she wasn't sure what to tackle first. She paused and then she called me. I'm going to file for divorce. The minute I have the paperwork, we'll drive to San Diego where his family lives. Will you serve him the papers? She asked. Absolutely, I said, ready to do whatever was necessary to help my sister out. A woman of her action, Jen filed for divorce on October 1st, and we drove down to serve him on October 2nd. It was his mother's birthday, so she had already previously arranged this visit, but Esteban had no idea what was about to hit him. Clueless, he simply thought Jen was driving down to have dinner with him and help celebrate his mother's birthday. Meanwhile, Jen had also asked her Mexican lawyer, Mario Mesias, to fly down to San Diego so he could be there with us all when it all went down, and he did. I drove on our way over there while Jen quietly sat by my side in the passenger seat, focused on the messages she was drafting. At one point, I interrupted her, as I felt a huge urge to tell her something. Chiquis and Jen had been on the outs for a while, so I knew that what I was about to say could cost me, but I wanted to be frank with her. I want you to know that I consider working with Chiquis. She stopped what she was doing, rested her back against the car door, stared at me and said, Okay. I met with her at my house and I also met with Angel, I continued. Angel was Chiquis' boyfriend at the time. I explained that I thought Chiquis definitely had potential and could do something, but in the end, I couldn't bring myself to leave my friend for her daughter. Jen's eyes softened as she smiled and said, I know you, and I knew you wouldn't leave me. I didn't want to cause her any more pain, but I also didn't want to take any part of the web of lies and deception that surrounded her. She was my sister by choice, and I always wanted to do right by her. After clearing the air, we picked up Mario and we drove to the last stretch of Esteban's house. Jen turned her attention back to her phone. She was furiously drafting an email to Esteban and Chiquis with one subject line. You should have turned the lights off. She took the time to detail everything she saw on the tape, revised it 3 times, and read it out loud to us in the car. Those 39 minutes killed my friend. Those were the 39 minutes that managed to pulverize her world and her heart. As we neared Esteban's house, Jenny laid out a plan. I'll go into his house, and when I'm ready, I'll text you and Mario, and then you guys can ring the doorbell. Jen got out of the car, walked up to the main entrance, and rang the doorbell, and his parents let her in. Esteban was out running an errand, so Jen excused herself, pretending that she needed to use the bathroom, but as she headed down the hallway, she snuck into Esteban's room and started grabbing all the jewelry that she could get her hands on. That asshole stole from me? Well, I'ma steal from his ass. No way was he going to get away with it, all without suffering the wrath of Jenny. Meanwhile, Mario and I noticed Esteban's Lamborghini pulling around the corner, so we got ready knowing all hell was about to break loose. A few minutes after he stepped into the house, we got a text from Jen to make our move. When the door opened, Jen let Esteban have it. I know everything, you piece of shit. She stared back at her with a daze, not knowing exactly what she was talking about. Then Jen turned to address his family. Given that they were so adamant about her signing a prenup, did you know that your prince of a son has been stealing money from me? She asked his mom. Then she proceeded to tell them everything, from the footage of him stealing to the paper with the combination in his writing and the mysterious time he spent with her daughter in the closet. She wanted to make sure they knew that their freeloading son had been up to those past few months. She wanted them to feel ashamed for having raised someone like him in this world. Esteban's only response to Jen's outrage was, I got my own money. Then Jen pulled out her wedding photo and handed it to Esteban's mom. Here, all yours, so you can remember. Meanwhile, I tried to serve him the divorce papers, but he didn't want to take them from me. He followed Jen outside and threw the photo at us, aggression pouring out of his pores, and as if he were in the brink of hitting her. His mom followed him outside, screaming and calling Jen names. Puta! Our son has no reason to steal from anyone. We raised a good son. Then I turned to Esteban and I said, let it go, trying to keep him at bay. It's over. And with that, I gave him the papers and we left. Once we were in the car, Jen showed us that she had also made out with his iPad, which now had a good reason to believe that was likely paid with her own money. As she was showing it to us, we noticed that it was still connected to his iPhone, and thanks to the synergy of Apple products, we saw Esteban texting Chiquis. Delete my messages, your mom is onto us, read his text. That was it. That was the final straw that broke this camel's back. Jen went absolute apeshit. She opened the email that she'd been drafting on the drive down and hit send without zero qualms and no remorse. Moments later, our phone started blowing up, and I began getting phone calls from Angel, Juan, Chiquis, and Esteban, non-stop. Everyone wanted to tell me Jen was crazy, but no one wanted to believe her or even be sympathetic to her. In the 2 hours that it took us to get home, the fire had been ignited and the lines were drawn in the sand. The family was divided and so was the team. Loss number 3 was disappointing and embittering, but loss number 4 was the final blow. Losing a man wasn't a big deal to Jen, but losing her daughter was unthinkable. The pain she felt by Chiqui's betrayal was seeded with profound and unquestionable love. In order to understand the depths of this agony, you must first understand their deep-seated bond. Chiquis was so much more than Jen's firstborn. She was her beloved daughter, her best friend, and her sergeant at home. Since Jen was only 16 when she had her, their relationship didn't follow the traditional mother-daughter roles. They've been in the trenches together, dealing with abuse, poverty, learning from their mistakes, celebrating each success, and building a bond based on trust and transparency. So when Jen decided to give her musical career a real shot, and when she decided to take herself seriously as an artist, when she realized that there was a business opportunity within arm's reach for her to do what she loved and make a living out of it, she dove in head first while Chiquis held down the fort at home. By this time, it wasn't just the two of them. Jen already had another 4 children in tow, so Chiquis' support was invaluable. While Jen was out on tour building her career and providing for her family, Chiquis was at home tending to her siblings' needs. Unknowingly, Jen had slowly taken on the dad's role of the family, working long hours to put food on the table, and Chiquis naturally gravitated to the mom's role, taking care of the kids and managing the money at home. Mind you, we're not talking about a grown woman here. We're talking about a young girl. Taking on these responsibilities and lending a helping hand to her hardworking mom, while Jen went off to work, Chiquis sacrificed going to college to support her family. Chiquis was actually the one who allowed Jen to become the star everyone knows and loves. Jen could have not done that without her. Not only did Chiquis hold down the fort at home, but she also served as her mom's stylist, driving downtown to buy Jen costume jewelry and clothing, making sure to pick out the most figure-flattering dresses for her mom. Jen trusted and relied on her blindly. Chiquis was without a doubt her right hand for many years, and she knew her mom inside and out. So much so that when I joined Jen's team, if I had a question and Jen wasn't available to answer it, I turned to Chiquis, who was always there, sharp and bubbly, ready to provide the necessary information for all of us to get the job done. Chiquis was Jen's everything. Now, this doesn't mean that their relationship was not without its own strains. One time, yearning for her independence like any normal teenager, Chiquis dropped everything and ran away from home. She sought shelter with her tío Lupillo, a decision that was a direct jab at Jen. It almost felt intentional because Chiquis knew too well how difficult it was for Jen to deal with Lupillo's lack of support for her career. So that move definitely hurt her. To Chiquis' credit, in seeking her independence and running away, she did try to break away from her family by getting a job at the mall. However, Lupillo ended up putting her in one of his apartments and made sure that she was cared for financially. Jen was seething inside. It was difficult to watch her partner in crime cross that line and out of all people go to Lupillo for help. Hoping to ease her pain, I often reminded Jen that he was still her uncle, and it was better that she reached out to him than a stranger off the street. I'm not sure how much that helped to deal with this situation. Nevertheless, their bond was so strong that 2 months later, mother and daughter reconciled, and although Jen had made a few changes and had hired a personal assistant, Chiquis stepped back into her role as a house manager, caregiver, daughter, sister, and princess. No matter what they went through, no matter what the ups and downs, the fights and the rebellions, Jen absolutely adored her children. She considered her sons princes and her daughters princesses, and often called them prince and princesses endearly. Jen wanted nothing more than for her kids to be happy and successful in life. She had learned to give 100% to everything she did, and she expected nothing less from her children. Regardless of whether they wished to be dishwashers, gardeners, nurses, or artists, or astronauts, all Jen cared about was making sure that they knew how to commit to reach their goals, often reminding them, whatever you choose to do your best at it and give it your all. Even though she had become the family's sole provider, Jen took her role as a mother very seriously. She may not have been present for some of the day-to-day events, but she always made sure to make time for them when she was home, encouraging them to have an honest and open relationship with her. And they knew that even though she had to be on the road to provide for them, she always had their backs. Jen was a mama bear in all her glory and was ready to fight tooth and nail for her children no matter what the circumstances. That's why I believe having to fight to protect Chiquis from her ex-husband's abuse made her feel like she felt her daughter in the worst possible way, and it filled her life with guilt, a guilt that sometimes led her to overcompensate while raising her. Becoming somewhat of an enabler when the going got tough at home, I experienced firsthand the many difficult times Chiqui had to face throughout her life. Her mother's second divorce, her father's trial, her mom's tape, and countless other highs and lows in Jen's roller coaster of a life. Chiquis proved to be a resilient young lady much like her mother, but she was also struggling to find herself in a family filled with big characters, a quest that she clearly embarked once the reality show was released. It was during the start of I Love Jenny that we first noticed major changes in Chiquis' behavior. With the boyfriends and the party and the excessive shopping, she's suddenly becoming another one of those Hollywood brats, which went against every fiber of Jen's being. Needless to say, that's when this mother-daughter relationship began hitting bigger hurdles. The first crackles of their estrangement really happened in the fall of 2011 when Jen decided it was time to start teaching her daughter the importance of fiscal responsibility. Until then, Chiquis worked at Jen's office running all the admin related to Jen's bustling career. In this capacity, Chiquis controlled her mama's accounts, gathering Jen's earnings and paying all the bills. Jen was never a fan of using credit cards, but every now and again, like everyone else, she had to. One of those occasions her card was denied. Being Jenny Rivera, this was a complete embarrassment. She called Chiquis right away, inquiring about the situation. "Hey, princess, what's going on with the card?" Jen asked. "Oh, they must have blocked it, Mom," said Chiquis, dodging the issue. However, when Jen's cards began getting denied with more frequency, it became clear that she needed to take matters in her own hands. She knew it was time to do a little digging. What she found was unsettling. Charges for trips to Las Vegas with bottle service and bills racking up to $3,500 a night. Plane tickets, clothes, and all types of lavish living that were above and beyond anything Jen herself would entertain. What the hell? Thought Jen. Did I raise a Kardashian? Jen flipped. We're talking about a woman who would move mountains to get her family off the ground and give them a better chance at life. Someone who worked tirelessly for every single penny she earned. Jen knew all too well the value of $1. And once she started doing well and when she wanted something, yeah, she got it, but she didn't go out to blow her money for the hell of it. She wasn't cheap, but life had taught her to be frugal, so Chiquis' behavior had gone too far in her book. Jen realized that the time had come to stop enabling her daughter and to start teaching her about accountability. "I think you have a problem," Jen told her daughter point blank on the phone one day. "You don't need all this stuff. We have plenty." Chiquis had no way out, and she knew she had dug herself in too deep. Her lifestyle had finally caught up with her, and she apologized and admitted to her mom that she had a problem with money. "If that's true, I think it's best thing that you earn some independence by learning responsibility," Jen said. And with that, Jen decided that the time had come for Chiquis to move out of the house and live on her own. Jen figured that if Chiquis went out and earned her own money and paid her own bills, she'd eventually learn how to better manage her own finances and truly understand the value of each dime in her pocket. At the time, we were also shooting Chiquis in Control, a spin-off of our I Love Jenny series. Jen thought that we should back out of production as part of this new effort to really educate Chiquis on the subject of autonomy. However, knowing it was Chiquis' first time out in the real world, Jen gave her $100,000 to help her embark in this new journey. Meanwhile, Chiquis also received another $100,000 from production company, so she was well armed to get her series up and running with his financial boost and finally have the independent life that she so yearned for when she ran away from home a few years earlier. It all seemed like a fantastic starting point. Chiquis was well poised to hit the running, but her show flopped. The first 2 episodes were flat and stale, so the network called a meeting to let us know that they couldn't air as is. Their only one condition to move forward was if Jen and the kids were more involved. Jen agreed to support the show and her daughter and stepped in with the cameos by her and her children. However, this was a rude awakening for Chiquis. She'd believed she'd be able to follow her mother's lead, but without her mother's support, it was a no-go. And so began the burgeoning tension between them that would eventually implode and causing irreparable damages to their lifelong bond. Those were trying times, but they helped Jen grow as a mother in patience, love, and kindness, doing all that she could to push her daughter in the right direction in hopes that she would find her way until their relationship hit yet another hurdle. Ángel del Villar. When Chiqui started dating Ángel, president-owner of Del Records, Jen was leery of him from the get-go. He had a reputation that Jen didn't like and most definitely didn't want for her daughter, but there wasn't much she could do. After all, she was the one who suggested Chiquis become more independent and try her hand at making her own decisions. So there she was doing what her mama said, only instead of finding her own way, she had found Angel. Once in the summer of 2012 came around, the relationship between Angel and Chiquis heated up, and they were clearly an official item. Jan still didn't approve, and Angel knew this, so he decided to throw Chiquis a party at his house just for her family. I wasn't planning on attending, but Jen called me and invited me to come along, so I said yes. I knew that she had her doubts about this guy and wanted help deciphering him. I honestly thought that Angel was finally trying to extend the olive branch to Jen. There was booze, music, and dancing, and everyone seemed to be having a good time. Then Angel approached Jen and asked to speak to her privately. Once again, he seemed sincere in his gentlemanly approach. I love your daughter, he said, and I want to be with her. What do you really want? Jen asked. Jen wasn't having it. She didn't buy the whole chivalrous act because she couldn't just get around the fact that he was still married to another woman. Yes, he was married, and that was not only completely unacceptable to her, it also proved that he couldn't possibly be serious about Chiquis, as he stated. Suffice to say, the party did nothing to win Jen over, but Angel stayed the course and stuck by Chiquis despite being married. He even helped her finance her new business venture, a blow-dry salon. When she fell short on little things like the electric sign, Angel swooped in to save the day. He also took over Jen's role as Chiquis' chief sponsor and provider of luxuries. It went against everything Jen was hoping to teach her daughter by asking her to move out of the house, but again, there was nothing that she could do at this point but just sit back and watch it all unfold before her eyes. Then Jackie's wedding came in September of 2012. You already know about the whole Elena debacle that happened a few days after this big event. But something else had gone down earlier, and something that didn't just anger Jen. It actually worried and frightened her. A few days prior to the wedding, Jen's brother Gustavo received a private message through Facebook from a woman who claimed to be Angel's wife. In it, she told Chiquis to leave her husband alone. She explained that they had children and homes together, and that although she'd been in Mexico attending family business, she knew what Angel had been up to. Shocked, Gustavo immediately contacted Jen and showed her the message. She then filled me in on what was going on, and if it weren't enough, we also had a reason to believe Angel's scorned wife had ties to important people in Mexico, the type you don't want to mess with, so you know what? As always, the show must go on. Jackie's big day arrived, and as I got dressed, it felt already as a disaster in the making. This was a big day for Jen. Her second daughter was getting married, the first one of her children to get hitched. It should have been a glorious moment, but it was fraught with palpable tension. On one hand, Jen had to deal with some wedding drama. Jackie's groom had previously dated Jen's sister Rosie, a fact that unsettled certain members of the Rivera family on the supposedly blissful day, like Juan, who much to Jen's disappointment was unable to hide his long face throughout the ceremony. On the other hand, I could tell that even though Jen was doing all that she could to be present and happy for her princess on this wonderful occasion, her mind kept wandering back to that message. The clash with Chiquis had stopped being only about her mother's concern for her daughter. Now it was also about pissing off the wrong family, the kind of family that would have zero qualms dealing with your ass, which only reinforced Jen's opinion about her daughter's love interest. After much thought, Jen decided to confront the situation head-on as always. She talked to Chiquis and told her what was going on, making her feelings about Angel crystal clear. But Chiquis wouldn't have it. Rather than paying attention to what Jen was telling her, she immediately accused her mom of being a hypocrite for accepting Jackie's husband, knowing he'd also dated Rosie, and not accepting Angel the same way. She wasn't able to see how different these situations were. Blinded by love, she couldn't see that she was playing with fire, and all Jen was hoping to do was stop her from getting seriously burned. As if all this drama weren't enough, shortly after Jackie's wedding, in a matter of weeks, Jen found out about Elena's dalliances with Chiquis, losing her best friend in the process, and then coming across the heart-wrenching surveillance footage, which culminated her filing for divorce and cutting ties with her daughter for good. As was customary in the Riveras, when shit hit the fan, Jen called a family meeting to prep them for the upcoming divorce and also talk about the whole Chiquis situation. Here's the clincher. One might think that the footage might have been enough to prove Chiquis' betrayal, but since the video didn't exactly show what happened between Esteban and Chiquis in that closet, even though Jen deemed it radically inappropriate, the family had their doubts regarding Jen's harsh accusations. Meanwhile, Chiquis never really gave Jen a clear explanation justifying why she had been in the closet with Esteban. She simply denied it, claiming that Jen was out of her mind. So when Jack walked into that family meeting and gave them a play-by-play, she suddenly found she had little to no support, until the person she least expected took a stand to defend her like no other. She thought Juan would be the one to take her side, having always been her consentido, the one she'd babied and take on tour and coddle. But Juan sat there in the table quietly. The one who first jumped up and spoke was none other than Lupillo. Jen loved her brother Lupillo dearly. They had always loved each other, but there was no denying that the past decade had been fraught with competition and sibling rivalry. Their careers had taken a toll on their relationship, so seeing Lupillo speak for her took her completely by surprise. Look, sis, right or wrong, you're my sister, and it's my obligation to support my sister, not my niece. If you're wrong, then we're going to be wrong together, but I'm supporting you. Jen and Chiquis had other falling outs, but this was the first time her brother came forward and made her feel his full support. It was also the first time she'd felt his full support in one of her crucial moments of her life. She was moved beyond words. After the meeting, Jen drove home and she called me to share this unbelievable moment, and I rejoiced with her. Every cloud has a silver lining, and this time around, the silver lining was finally being able to bury the hatchet with her brother Lupillo, a spark of joy amid the darkest of days. Jen's issue with Chiquis erupted into a total estrangement and tore them apart. She couldn't wrap her mind around what the hell her daughter had been doing in the closet with her husband, filled with doubts and insecurities of having a gut feeling but not knowing what to think. Jen's pain worsened, but no matter how heart-wrenching the situation had become, she wasn't about to go out and bash her daughter in public, in the media, because in the end she loved her. She was a reflection of herself. Even through the pain, she wanted to protect her. But Jen and Chiquis' problems were still far from over. In early November 2012, just about a month before the fatal crash in Mexico, Jen was invited to a music award show in LA. She decided to attend, and as usual with her, no matter the drama that she was dealing with at home, she always managed to keep it together for her career. I hadn't planned on being there with her until I got a worried call from Julie, her assistant. She told me that Angel was roaming the area and it looked like he had been drinking. I dropped everything, got in my car, and sped over there as fast as possible, knowing this couldn't amount to any good. Meanwhile, Jen had a camera and crew of her getting a footage of I Love Jenny as they were making her way on one of those narrow hallways backstage towards the dressing room. Angel aggressively bumped into one of our cameramen with no one gets in my way attitude, shoving his way down the corridor like a high school bully. Jen hadn't noticed any of it until she saw the look on my face when I walked into her dressing room. She immediately realized that something was off. As she continued to sign autographs and snap pics with fans, she asked me, "What's going on?" "We need to get out of here," I said. "Let's avoid any drama with Angel." I explained to her that he was there and seemed to be sniffing around for trouble. So I arranged a car for her to meet out in the front. When she got in with her makeup artist and hairstylist, as I walked over to my own vehicle, which I valet parked, as Jen's car pulled away, she noticed a fan trying to say hi. As she was always ready to please her fans, grateful for their support, she rolled down her window to greet her. But until that split second did she realize that standing next to this woman was Angel, who began talking shit and insulting her, calling her awful names right there out in the street, in front of everyone, a moment that was captured on video and went viral years ago. Not one to stand down, Jen got out of the car like a true gangster and beelined over to him, only to be met by the barricade of security guards surrounding him. But that didn't stop her. I ran over to her, made my way through the crowd, and picked her up and brought her back to the car. But before getting back in, she stood out in the frame and got her 2 cents in there for everyone to see. "If you want to talk, call me. When I pass by, don't talk to me, porque si tienes algo que decir, you say it to my damn face." Angel narrowed his eyes and replied, "Yeah, we'll see," with a smirk on his face, right down that gave me the chills. But I had no time to process this because the crowds began to swarm around us, so I put Jen in the car and shut the door. As they zoomed off, I suddenly noticed that she was being followed by a black van. I ran over to my car, drove out, and quickly realized I was being followed too. What the hell? We were near the Gibson Theater with a shitty cell phone reception, so I couldn't get through to Jen immediately. When I finally was able to connect, I said calmly as possible, "Don't go home. Stay on the freeway. You're being followed." In a panic, Jen turned around and replied, I see him. No, I began to settle in. We were officially in danger. However, after driving a while longer, we managed to lose both vans. All I could think that they were likely trying to send us a message to scare us. In any case, that night I went to Jen's house and gave her an armed weapon. I also set up security guard on the street outside her house. I didn't mention this last bit to her because I knew she wouldn't agree, but I didn't want us to take any chances. I wanted to make sure that she was safe. What followed was a social media barrage attacking Chiquis. That's your boyfriend? That's the guy you're fighting for? That's the man that says that loves you, that disrespects your mother? Jen was pissed and scared and worried, but there wasn't much else that she could do. Meanwhile, the next morning I decided to take matters into my own hands. I just couldn't sit around and wait, so I drove around to Angel's office. I felt that we needed to hash out what happened the night before. He wasn't there, so I left a message and got a call back from him later. Pete, it's not personal. I have nothing personal with you. It's with her. We hung up, and as I was driving home, while I was talking to Jen on my Bluetooth, I suddenly got rear-ended on the freeway. Shocked, I yelled out, I got hit! Jen couldn't see what was going on, so she immediately assumed that she heard on the other side of the line was gunfire, rather than my car being totaled. She freaked out. Where are you? Where are you? She screamed at the top of her lungs, and I will never forget the care and concern in her voice that day. She was forced to entertain life without me. The irony of it all still haunts me to this day. Everything just spiraled downward from there. It was almost Thanksgiving, and Jen was busy filming La Voz Mexico, but managed to get a few days off for the holiday, which we were filming for her reality show. We were also working on a show about her brother Juan, her lifelong consentido. But since the drama with Chiquis, the family was divided, and Juan, whom I guess believed Chiquis, didn't want much to do with Jen anymore. Feeling alienated and hurt, Jen no longer knew where she could turn. We had many talks around that time, especially late at night when she couldn't sleep. Jen kept going back to the surveillance footage, wondering what her daughter and her husband were doing in that closet. Those foggy images haunted her till the day she died. I honestly don't think it was an affair. If anything, it was possible that they were accomplices after some of her money. Why do I think that? It turned out that Esteban was broke and had major IRS lying. Meanwhile, Chiquis wasn't living at home and had money issues, and didn't have the means to keep up with her Hollywood lifestyle. Both seem to have motives, but we will never know for sure. Only Esteban and Chiquis, and God knows what happened that night in that closet. All I know that it was the straw that broke the camel's back in Jen's world. About a week after Thanksgiving, my father passed away, and that's when we had our last heart-to-heart talk in the hospital parking lot. The one where I was able to see the weight of her life and pain through her sorrowful brown eyes. The one where I realized my dear friend was truly broken and lost. From where I was standing, last year of Jen's life read like a game of emotional Rubik's Cube. Things kept coming at her, and when it rains, it pours ferocity. And just one thing seemed to be handled, the next one would start to unfurl. Her world at home was coming undone before her eyes, but her career was in full swing, and no matter what was going on in her personal life, Jen knew that the show had to go on. Work wasn't only a duty she had to fulfill, it was her safe haven, her shelter, a place where she felt loved and supported, a refuge where she could face her inner demons and openly let her tears stream down her face. And that's exactly what she did on December 8, 2012, in the Monterrey Arena. She belted out Paloma Negra, the last song she sang on this earth, dedicated to none other than her beloved Chiquis. Watching that performance, still heart-wrenching to this day. It was so raw, so authentic. Jen at her finest, darkest, deepest hour, singing to her daughter because despite all their disagreements and all the pain that they caused each other, one thing remained intact. Love. A love that clearly shines through the tears rolling down Jen's cheeks as she sang. Pero mis ojos se mueren sin mirar tus ojos, y mi cariño con la aurora te vuelve a esperar. But my eyes will die without looking into yours, and my love with the dawn will wait with you again. The day of Jen's last concert on December 8, 2012, my family and I laid my father to rest in California. My dad had been on life support prior to passing and living at the hospital, with my siblings and me taking turns to be with him. I'm the eldest of 6, and I was the strong one because my dad expected me to be strong, so I took that role to heart with my family, just like Jen did with hers. Another reason we all understood each other so well. In any case, that night after the funeral and after what would be Jen's last concert, she called to check up on me and to see how everything had gone. She was really happy with the show and told me that it had been fantastic. I was so sorry I couldn't be there, and she'd also hoped that her dad and her youngest son, Johnny, would have came with her, but due to work and school, they couldn't make it either. So we chit-chatted for a while, and she told me she was starving, which was the norm with her because she never ate before a concert and was always famished by the end of the night. So we said our goodbyes and hung up. I never imagined this would be the last conversation I would ever have with her in my lifetime. As I got ready for bed, I remember telling my wife, tomorrow I just want to catch up on some football and have some comfort food. Even though I knew my father was going to die, losing someone you love still requires time to mourn and process it all. She and my family respected that and understood I needed that time to heal. So we turned off the lights and went to sleep. But rather than sleeping in, I was jolted awake by our home phone ringing off the hook early on a Sunday morning. While I processed the sound, our home phone hardly ever rung. Everyone calls my cell phone, so hearing the landline was an anomaly. My wife gently nudged me and said, the phone, you should go check the answering machine. As I rubbed the sleep off my eyes, I automatically thought that one of my aunts might not be feeling well. They were a bit older and they just buried their brother. I was almost afraid to go downstairs to check the machine. I knew it had to be something important and I was afraid of hearing the message. When I pressed play, I was thrown. It wasn't any of my family members, but rather the voice of a good friend of mine in the business asking me to give him a call about Jen's plane. The following message was from our agent at CAA calling to see if I could confirm the rumor that was circulating about her plane going down. And the next one was of a good friend at Televisa executive calling me about the plane. At first, I was in complete disbelief. I honestly didn't think it was true. In Mexico, if you're in a private plane, you're basically an hour away from anywhere in the country. And with Jen, we were used to getting on a plane after a show and flying to another city to attend an after party or meet with friends for breakfast. Furthermore, in the United States, you're required to register your destination when you take a private jet, but that wasn't the case in Mexico. There, you simply hopped on a jet as if you're taking a cab and tell the pilot where you want to go, and he'll fly you there. Knowing all this, I heard the messages and all the commotion, and instead of worrying, my first thought was honestly, damn, Jan must have decided to go somewhere else. The possibility of the plane actually going down wasn't even registering on my radar. Still in shock, trying to process what was happening, another thought suddenly crossed my mind. Maybe she'd been hijacked from the plane. This wasn't unheard of in Mexico. Even Learjets land in the Sierra for the cartels, so the possibility of Jen being held hostage somewhere for ransom wasn't that outrageous. If that wasn't the case, I knew Jen would expect me to move heaven and earth to find her and bring her back home, so I sprang into action. Jen trusted me, and she knew if she was ever in danger or in trouble, I'd be the one to get her out of it. So I was ready to turn at every rock until I found her. The next hour ticked by, and I continued plotting ways to get to Mexico and to bring Jen back home. I was thinking of people I could call, digging up any connections I could come up with that could help me find her. However, my thoughts and plans were quickly interrupted by the incoming flood calls from our staff. What's going on? What should we do? I honestly have no idea. I was fielding all these calls without knowing what to tell everyone, because I wasn't sure myself what to think or believe. Time flew by at 6 a.m., then became 10 a.m. in a heartbeat, and we still didn't know where Jen was. In another blink of an eye, I was sitting in her office at her house with all her staff, taking the lead, flying blind, trying to figure out what was going on. Everyone was looking at me to indicate what the next step should be, but I still didn't have a clue. Meanwhile, the family decided that they would all meet and wait for the news together at Jen's mother's house. So when the kids left for their grandmother's place, we moved the staff's headquarters from Jen's home to my home. We settled in, not knowing that this would become our nerve center up until the memorial 10 days later. In the meantime, Televisa News reached out to me asking if there was any way that we could hop on to secure a server line for them to share their news feed with us. That's when we saw the crash site. In that instant, everything suddenly switched gears. We went from we gotta find her mode to we gotta bring her home. I shared the news with the family, but they weren't willing to let go of their hope. It was all way too hard to come to terms with, so they stepped out of Mrs. Rivera's home and stood before the press, stating that they were still looking for her and they would bring her back. They were still in denial, but back home we had already seen the feed. We already seen the shredded pieces of clothes strewn around the site. She was gone. Shaken by the news, I numbed the pain by diving into work mode and figuring out the next steps. Identify her remains, bring her home, and plan the memorial. Meanwhile, the media circus ensued. The family kept making statements to the press outside their home while the brothers were figuring out who would travel to Mexico to bring their sister back. Back at my place, behind the scenes, Julie had taken off back to Jen's house to grab one of her toothbrushes and some hair from her hairbrushes to give it to the family so they could identify Jen's body via DNA sample. It was all so bleak. We then started fielding questions from Jen's siblings about her body. More than 600 body parts had been found in the site, and they all needed to be tested to figure out if any of them belonged to Jen. Gustavo and Juan were the ones who flew down to Mexico to help bring this investigation to a close, but we knew more about Jen than they did. They kept calling us with questions. The coroner would like to know if my sister had back surgery, asked one of the brothers on the phone. No, she never had any back surgery, replied Julie. Well, the coroner is saying that this body part that they found is scarred and more likely indicates that this person had surgery in their back. As gruesome as all this sounds, we finally realized that they were describing the front part of her torso. She had a hernia surgery that caused a scar in her abdomen, so we provided all this information in detail to help confirm that indeed was Jen's remains. To top it all off, let's not forget that I had just laid my father to rest the day before. I still hadn't had the chance to begin to mourn my dad when suddenly I was dealing with the shock of losing Jen. It was all too much, but as the eldest in my family, always looked upon for strength and protection, I somehow powered through. Not only did I have to be strong for my family, I suddenly also had to be strong for Jen until her accident was resolved and she was laid to rest in peace. I couldn't afford to break down as in the news unfolded, I turned my emotions off and kept plugging through this tragic outcome. Practical leadership skills went on high alert to get whatever was needed to be done and be as efficient as possible. It was almost like another major concert, another major event for her, but this time around, she wasn't there to guide us. We had 33 employees who were heartbroken and lost, so I stepped in and manned the fort. Now, as if taking the lead with my family, Jen's family, and our work family wasn't enough, we also couldn't forget about the other 4 families in Mexico who were also grieving a huge loss and had far less means to retrieve their loved ones' remains and give them the burial and peace that they deserve. Also, we had her band devastated by the news and stuck in Monterrey, and they too needed to get home. There were so many moving pieces, so much going on at once, that in retrospect, I honestly have no idea how I managed to continue marching forward through some of the darkest days of our lives. But there was absolutely no room for weakness. I was focused on my main mission. We had to bring our girl back home.